Hey everybody, Chronos here with another DCS video. And today I want to take a look at the mission in the Mig-21bis, which is one of my favorite planes in DCS, because I am really interested in those a little bit older 3rd and 2nd generation jet fighters, like the Mig-21, and I hope I will get more of those soon. I will take a more in-depth look at the Mig-21 in general in a later video, but in this one I want to show you primarily a mission in the plane. And this time I got something a little different than usual, I would say. So that is also a bit of a test run on how videos on missions like this are received, and I hope well, because I like them. Now, with a simulator like DCS, there are a lot of tasks that can be challenging and exciting other than shooting stuff, though don't worry, we will be shooting stuff too in this mission. But it is not the challenging part. Well, let's take a look at the scenario for this mission. Now, the basics are pretty simple. An enemy force in our fictional war has been pushed back and surrounded in Batumi. Now, being surrounded, they are cut off from friendly lines, and the only way to resupply them would be via plane or ship, which we can prevent because we have air superiority and we can shoot down planes and sink ships. Now, however, the weather report is telling us that we have a thunderstorm building and moving this way, and we soon will have a thunderstorm going on above the whole area, with a low-hanging cloud cover and rain. The enemy, being aware of this, plans to use this opportunity to resupply his units in Batumi at night via ship, thinking we can't do anything about it because we can't fly in this weather in our old Mig-21s. So the mission is to prove them wrong, break out of the low cloud cover right over the harbor and attack the ships in Batumi harbor. The mission is more of a psychological nature, so it is not necessary to sink the ships, just attack and damage one, to show that we have the capability of doing so even in those circumstances and discourage the enemy navy from trying something like this again. So, as you can see, the basic task is straightforward and simple. Fly to Batumi harbor, shoot the ships in the harbor with our S-5 rockets, which we carry 4 pods of the smaller 16-round pods, and then fly home after that. The thing is, as you may have noticed, the weather isn't exactly what one would call perfect flying weather. So how do we find the targets? And then there's the going back home part after that. Now, with the Mig-21 being an older plane, we don't have any satellite navigation systems on board, of course. What we do have, however, is the RSBN radio navigation system. Now, RSBN stands for Radiotechniskaya Systema Bližnej Navigacji, and is similar to the Western VOR, DME or the military TACAN systems, which can tell us the direction as well as the distance to a VOR DME station, usually located at an airfield. Batumi has one, but since it is in enemy territory we can't use it. But Kabuleti and Kutasai airfields are in friendly territory, so this is what we can use to navigate. Now, here is the plan. We are taking off from one of our airfields east of Tbilisi, which is our home base, climb to about 4000 meters to stay clear of any mountains en route, and fly roughly 280 degrees west-northwest towards Kutasai airfield, till we are in range of the Kutasai RSBN about 180 to 200 kilometers out, and then fly straight towards it. Now, since there are mountains east of Batumi, we want to attack along the coast. But first, let's get this bird in the air, and then we take a look at how we approach the target. Now, I taxied to the runway and got a few things ready before we take off, like switching the weapon selectors to rocket pods so we have it selected and ready when we do our attack. It's hard to see the knobs and switches at night in the cockpit, but thankfully we have a very high-tech tool to get around that, flashlight. Now, since we are on a short runway and I want to climb quickly after takeoff, having no visibilities of obstacles, I brought some JATOs to speed up the takeoff a bit, and I have those in automatic mode, so they fire automatically after reaching a certain speed. And yes, I do know that the more correct term is RATO, but I think that sounds dumb, so I keep calling them JATO like I've always done. With the afterburners and the JATOs firing, we are in the air pretty quickly and are ascending through the cloud cover, which around here is low enough that it goes all the way down to the airfield. Now, first thing after takeoff is of course to retract the gear. An important thing on the Mig-21 is that you don't forget to put the gear handle back in a neutral position after that, because the brakes on the Mig-21 are pneumatic, meaning they use compressed air, and the brakes will automatically brake the wheels when you start to retract the gear. If you don't put the handle back in neutral, the brakes will stay on and waste air through the entire flight, and you might be out of air by the time you land, and then you have no brakes, which is unpleasant. I also retract the MIG's landing lights, as they are sticking out the wings when they are turned on and will get damaged when you fly too fast with them extended. That is something to keep in mind when you used to flying the plane in daylight. There's an extra strap when flying at night. And last but not least, I also dropped the chater pods so I don't drag those around. And then, as the plan suggests, I keep climbing till I reach about 4000 meters and head west-northwest at heading 270s in the rough direction of Kutasai, our first waypoint. We are about to climb out of the clouds by now and can see the occasional lightning in the clouds below, which looks nice, I would say. Now, at about 2400 meters we are out of the clouds and got some clear vision. And we can see the stars, but that of course does not help us to find anything on the ground, which is still below the cloud cover. Well, after a bit more climbing we reach the desired altitude and level out to get the RSPN navigation system online. I also noticed that I forgot to retract the takeoff flaps, so my plane is a bit slower because of that, but I rectified this mistake. And then get the RSPN ready. We should be in range of that by now. Now that is easy enough to do. Kutasai RSPN is on channel 13, so we go over to the RSPN console on the left and dial that in for the RSPN, as well as the BRMG landing system, which we will need later. We get the green light indicating the system is getting a signal, and we hear the Morse code signal of Kutasai RSPN, and then flick the ARC RSPN selector switch to RSPN. The distance indicator tells us we are closing in on 155 km out from the beacon. We get directional information from the compass and the artificial horizon. The needle on the compass with the round end shows the direction to the beacon, and the yellow needle in the artificial horizon is the course director. When we are on course, it is centered. If it points to the left or right, we have to fly to the left or right to get on course. Pretty straightforward. Now in this case I want to fly straight towards Kutasai, which is to our right at about 280 degrees, and I don't care about approaching it on a specific radial. That will come later. So for now I ignore the course director needle and just turn to the right till I am pointing straight at Kutasai. Level out and keep flying in that direction for about 150 kilometers till I am almost on top of it. Well, that is how we will get to Kutasai, but how do we get from there to the target? Now, as I mentioned, I want to approach the target along the coast, more or less, to avoid any high obstacles like mountains, since I will have to descend into the clouds as I go down to attack altitude, so I won't see any mountains that might be in the way. In order to do so, we will switch to the Kobuleti RSPN on channel 15. Now, the target, the Batumi harbor, is seen from Kobuleti at 203 degree heading and 35 kilometers away. So what we want to do is fly along the Kobuleti RSPN 203 degree radial towards the target, descending while we do so to attack altitude, and reaching 34 km away from the beacon, go in a dive and hopefully come out right above the target. Now to do so we just have to go to the NPB compass and with the dial on the bottom rotate the course needle to 203 degrees. Now with the RSPN channel 15 dialed in, the course director knows we want to fly along the 203 radial and it will direct us to intercept it. The reason we flew to Kutasai first is that this way we stay away from the higher mountains to the east and northeast of Batumi. Now as you can see, the needle in the NPB points to our left at the location of Kobuleti, and the course director indicates, not surprisingly, a turn to the left. Depending on what you want to do, this does not have to be the case though. There are far more complex scenarios possible. Well, I turn to the left and start to fly towards Kobuleti. And a bit later we are closing in on the Kobuleti airfield. Now as you can see on the NPB, the locator needle points straight at Kobuleti. The course needle is set to 203 degrees, still a bit to the left, and the course director also points to the left. The reason is that I want to fly over Kobuleti first before I start to intercept the 203 radial. Again, to stay clear of the rain, and I know for certain that starting from Kobuleti I am well away from anything high enough to fly into when I start to descend after passing Kobuleti to get to attack altitude. So I am ignoring the directions from the course director that wants me to turn more to the 203 radial until I am above Kobuleti and then make the turn. Now we just passed above the Kobuleti RSPN station, and you could see that the needle in the NPB compass turned around and is now pointing to the rear, and the round part is in front, as the beacon is now behind us. The distance is now counting up again too, of course. Now, having passed Kobyleti, I change course, and now I want to follow the direction of the course director as closely as possible to stay on the 203 radial that is pointing straight at the target, and at the same time I also start to descend a bit to get down to an altitude I can make an attack from, about 1500 meters above ground. The altimeter is to the left of the artificial horizon and compass between the two, by the way. The large needle indicates hundreds of meters and the small one 1000 meters. The speedo is right above it. And also important on the other side to the right is the variometer showing descent rate. We are of course in the middle of the cloud cover still, which is why our course needed to go around obstacles higher than that. Now, back where we took off from, the cloud cover was all the way to the ground with zero visibility, but that was on a higher sea level. Here at the coast, the cloud cover should still be above ground level by a few hundred meters. The plan is to just do one firing pass and then get out of there again. And we want to break out of the clouds right above the target so the opponent has no time to react. I got my rocket pods set up to fire 16 rockets per salvo to get as much of them out in one pass as possible. Well, looking at the range we are getting from the RSBN system, we are coming up on 30 kilometers from the RSBN station. The target is 35 kilometers from the station, and I plan to start my dive at 33 to 34 kilometers to hopefully come out of the clouds right at 35 kilometers, and hopefully with the targets inside right away and ready to attack them right away. But of course the system is not 100% accurate like a satellite navigation system, so there is a margin of error. And also, I don't know 100% how high above ground the cloud cover will end, and therefore how soon I will see the target and how much room for corrections I will have. But we will see soon, as we are coming up on 33 kilometers and I start to push the nose down and get the plane in a dive towards what I hope is the target. As I do so, you can see the variometer needle start to point down as the descent rate is increasing and the altimeter needle starts spinning. I do have a radar altimeter as well, which is more accurate than the normal one, and it will give a warning if I get too low, so in theory it should warn me if the cloud cover is too low and I have to pull up before I break out of it. However, the cloud ceiling is just high enough, however it is lower than I hoped, and coming out of the dive I can see that I'm not quite above the target. The harbor is directly to my right, close but not good enough, so I can't attack the ships right away, I have to turn around to do so. And I have to be careful to stay low while I turn back towards the harbor, so that I don't fly back into the cloud cover and lose vision on those ships again. Now, having the plane turned around, I start to get the pipper on the first ship, which is barely visible in the dark harbor, and then I start my attack run with rockets. Now, my first salvo falls a bit short because I forgot to change my gun sight from guns to rockets, so I aim a bit higher and the second salvo appears to be on target, though it is hard to see since it is pretty dark. But I did hit the ship with the salvo and I damaged it, which is, as I explained at the start, the point of the mission. If we have done enough damage to the ship to sink it or not is not relevant for its success, and unlikely with the small S5 rockets anyway. So I turn out towards the sea so that I don't run into any mountains while I climbing through the clouds back to a safe altitude. Well, that was easy enough so far, but now we are presented with the slight issue of getting this bird back on the ground again. Our home base is an airfield behind Tbilisi where we started from, but that is not where we will land, because back there the cloud cover goes all the way down to the ground. Also, we don't have the fuel to do that anyway. Instead we will land at Kutaisi, the airfield we used as the first waypoint. It is still pretty close to the coast and low enough so that it is below the clouds. Now, in order to get there we use the RSBN again, on station 13. This time though I don't just want to fly straight at Kutaisi, because we want to land there this time. And the thing is, we aren't a helicopter. To land we need the runway, so I want to approach the airfield from the correct heading, so that when I break out of the clouds I have the runway in front of me. I want to land on runway 7 on Kutaisi, meaning the flight direction when landing there is roughly 70 degrees, 74 in case of Kutaisi. So I want to approach it on radial 74, and this is what we dial in with the course needle on the NPB. Since we want to fly towards it, not away from it, like we have done with Kobyleti and our target, we use the thick rear part of the needle, or the front part on 254 degrees, that's the same thing. Now, the flight director needle won't send us directly to Kutaisi, but instead it will let us intercept the 74 radial that leads towards it. However, in this case, after having flown back along the coast a bit, we happen to be in the correct spot to fly straight at the airfield already on the correct radial. Now, in order to land there, I will use the BRMG landing system, which is similar to the ILS system. I will descend a bit while flying towards the airfield, and about 20 km out I am in range of the BRMG system, which uses those small needles or bars above and to the left of the artificial horizon to indicate the location of the glide path to the runway. The little circle represents your plane, so if the bar is to the left, the glide path is to the left. Same with altitude. If the small bar to the left is above the ring in the middle, the glide path is above and you are too low. That is of course after you turn the BRMG on. At the moment we are still in nav mode. As I get closer to the airfield and descend, I also slow down and I extend my landing lights. They won't help here in the clouds, but there's one thing I don't have to do later when I do it now, and I don't plan on going fast enough for them being extended would be any kind of problem anymore. And then I switch the BRMG mode for landing on, as I am within 20 km from the airfield by now, and I get a signal right away. You get 2 red warning flags when you don't get a signal, which can happen when you are either not in range or not pointing at the runway, which has to be within 45 degrees to the left or right of your nose. As you can see by the little bar above the artificial horizon, I'm a bit to the right of the glide path, so I turn slightly to the left to intercept it, and I'm also a little bit too high, so I descend a bit steeper. You may have noticed that the needle in the compass that points right at the airfield was pointing to the right while I was doing a turn to the left. That is because the system gives me corrections to intercept the glide path to the airfield, not the airfield itself, something that can lead to confusion if you are not used to it in low visibility conditions like this. Now I extended the landing gear, which slows me down quite a bit, and it seems while doing so I overshot the glide path a bit, and now I have to turn a bit to the right to intercept it again. You have to keep an eye on the location of the airfield on a compass though, and only make small corrections to intercept the flight path. As I see the bar get closer to the middle again, indicating that I close in on it again, I already start to turn back to the left a bit, anticipating intercepting glide path and not wanting to overshoot it again. I also have the flaps extended to the middle position by now, that is 25 degrees, and I have to throttle up a bit to keep my speed from dropping too much. And then I'm finally breaking out of the clouds, and after I do so I can see the airfield in front of me. With that as a visual reference, the whole approach gets a whole lot easier. I extend the flaps to full, however I got a bit too slow as I did so I have to give more power to speed up again a bit. With getting too slow I also descended too fast, and now I am well below the glide path. Here it is important not to do any kind of panic reactions and try to climb back up towards it. I am below the glide path, so I just stop descending till I intercept it again. I pull the nose up a bit, and as you can see on the variometer, stop my descent for now and fly level for a bit until I see the little bar start to drop down again, indicating that I'm closing in on the glide path again. I also slowly get back up to the speed I want. I am also a little bit to the left of the recommended glide path, so I put my nose to the right of the runway to get back on the proper course. Though in this case, thanks to the visual contact, I just use the runway as a reference point and not the needle. And then I keep the nose of the aircraft pointed about at the closer end of the runway, which is recommended for approach in the Mig-21. And then I keep the setting up for a little bit. Now, after flying a bit in this direction, I can see the bar for the glide path start to drop down, so I start to descend again, as I am about to intercept the flight path again. And I'm soon back on the glide path and coming into land on short final. Since I am still a bit to the left of the glide path, I keep the Pippa a bit to the right of the runway to counter this, and there's also a little bit of wind from the right that might influence the flight path a bit. The nose of the Mig is still pointing at the closer end of the runway, and I keep my speed around 350 kph now. I am about to cross the threshold of the runway. Now it is important to keep the descent rate in check when touching down, so you don't crash into the runway too fast. So I flare, pull the nose up as I am about to touch down, and slow the descent rate and then touch down. So we made it to the ground. I activated drag chute to help me slow down, though I think you would not have needed it here, but better safe than sorry. And well, with this landing we are done for the night, and this mission was a success. Now, I know this was a bit different from the missions I had so far, focusing more on things like bad weather navigation and landing in the Mig-21, but I hope it was enjoyable nonetheless, as I think this aspect of DCS is quite interesting and new to me, especially in those older second and third generation fighters which I prefer, as they do not have modern GPS or moving maps for example, but still some modern equipment and weapons to play with. I really like seeing these older tech in action. And I have to say, playing this mission, the landing here, was for me one of the most exciting moments flying in DCS. After the mission done, you really don't want to screw this up. But in any case, let me know what you think of videos in this style, which are focused not just on fighting. Well, and this is it for this video. As always, I hope it was entertaining, thanks for watching, and maybe I'll see you next time.